Good day, listeners. This is the THOUGHTCAST, the words of Aaron Swartz. This is going to be posts 8 through 17 in that order. And I'd just like to say that I've switched my method of delivering these. I won't be offering a insight at the end of every episode now. I think that a recap after, say, every 6 episodes and just enough posts to fill up about 45 minutes would be enough, because I find my biggest problem is right now getting mixed up with information that I'm going through in future podcasts and trying to listen through the past ones that I've already recorded and trying to find insight. Yeah, because it's hard to dial back your knowledge once you kind of develop it, I guess. But I feel like there's a lot of things that correlate between episodes, and it is a storyline. So the thing is that after, say, every 6 episodes, I'll have a recap probably on a off day. And yeah, and check the videos for these, because I do post them up. If you can see a video in YouTube or Spotify, to include the video of the process of the painting that I'm doing, because it's I'm at a point right now where I've got like 7 or 8 for it, and then I just want to cut down the confusion for me in delivering his message.
Raw Thought by Aaron Swartz. The God who wasn't there and the one who was. I was doing some research into the idea that Jesus never existed. When I first looked into it, I thought it was just a crackpot theory, and I was curious why anyone would believe this, explains Brian Fleming. To my surprise, I found the evidence kept stacking up. The more I looked into it, the more that the facts aligned with those who said Jesus was just a legendary character. The shaky evidence and the poor reasoning were actually on the side of those who said that Jesus did exist. And so Fleming, that boy, the musical, Nothing So Strange, fair and balanced, an all-around digital rights supporter, decided to make a movie. The result, which is currently being screened across the country in theaters and at atheist organizations and will be released on DVD soon, is a shockingly good film. Fleming begins at the beginning, the popular story of Jesus, in a hilarious montage of old footage taken from the Perlinger archives underneath deadpan narration. He tells the story in 6 minutes, and then it's on to debunking it. Through interviews with various experts, illustrated with entertaining graphics, he tries to reconstruct the historical evidence for the story, only to find there isn't much and a lot doesn't add up. Convinced the story is wrong, Fleming takes aim at the right-wing Christian fundamentalists who act based on it, the wishy-washy Christian moderates who enable them, and the rest of the system. He concludes by heading back home to the fundamentalist Christian school he attended as a child to confront the principal about what he's teaching children. Fleming's previous film, Nothing So Strange, which I also reviewed, was interesting, but, in fairness, rather amateurish. No such criticism can be made of this film, which has some of the best graphics I've seen in a documentary and a brilliant score composed from the Creative Commons licensed wired CD by the heretofore unknown DJ Madsen, a nom de plume of Fleming, I'm beginning to suspect, by remixing popular artists. The whole thing, from the interviews down to the promotional posters, hangs together so well that it's hard to believe Fleming is doing this all himself. But apparently he is, with no liberal atheist conspiracy to back him. Although, in full disclosure, Larry Lessig and former Creative Commons Executive Director Glenn Otis Brown received special thanks in the credits. And in a remote Q&A via iChat after the screening here at Stanford, Fleming was wearing a Creative Commons shirt. So if you want to investigate a conspiracy, that's where I'd look. On the other hand, Fleming has always had what Bill O'Reilly might call a parasitic sense of self-promotion. His film Nothing So Strange received press largely because it included scenes of Bill Gates being assassinated. And during the California recall, Fleming jumped into the fray on the platform, if elected, I will resign. Thus, making Lieutenant Governor Bustamante governor, since at the time he was refusing to run, thinking he'd draw support away from the actual governor. When Fox sued Al Franken for using the phrase fair and balanced, Fleming wrote a play with the name. When Arnold Schwarzenegger sued the makers of a bobblehead version of him, Fleming posted a photo of Arnold's penis. Both times, he insisted the works were a form of political protest, but he still charged money for the products. He did the same when he released portions of Nothing So Strange under a Creative Commons license. It's one thing to support free speech, It's another to try to make money off of other people's support for it. What's unsettling about this film is not how Fleming is using various atheist groups to screen and promote it. That's perfectly reasonable, especially since he's giving the DVDs to the groups at outrageously low prices. No, what's unsettling is a hidden feature on Fleming's site called the Grassroots Promotion Team, or GPT. In general, these things are nothing new. Just personally, I remember volunteering for Apple when the iMac came out and joining a Street Team website to promote a Buffy DVD. The idea behind such sites is that your particular group of obsessive lonely fans will spend their free time promoting your products on various forums and websites in exchange for a chance to win some lame prizes. It's sad when big corporations do this, but when independent political folks like Fleming do it, it becomes a little creepy. It's also problematic. Take the movie's soundtrack, which is sold on Amazon. Normally, such obscure CDs have hardly any reviews. But this one not only had 11, but they were all amazingly glowing. Wow, this CD must be really good, I thought. But when I saw Fleming was awarding 100 points for each Amazon review, it suddenly made sense. If everyone plays this game, Amazon reviews will quickly become meaningless, which is why I don't think it's a very good idea to start. The film is valuable and grassroots promotion of it is certainly a good thing. I just wish it felt a little less like using well-meaning people to make money for Fleming and a little more like a cooperative community with the aim of spreading the real news. Brian Fleming response: Thanks for the kind words about the movie. I agree with some of your criticism of the Street Team, but I think your aim is off the mark with much of it. Amazon reviews. There's an old phrase in publicity. I don't care if the review is positive or negative, just put the title in the headline. As an indie filmmaker always struggling to get the word out against competing messages backed by tens of millions of dollars, I definitely subscribe to this philosophy. It was never the design of the movie's Street Team to load up Amazon with praise. Frankly, a mix of angry 1-star reviews and passionate 5-star reviews would be better. It's no secret that authors and their publishers and friends stack the Amazon book reviews, as has been documented, but I don't wish to add to that clutter. I've never asked anyone to post nice things on Amazon about the soundtrack CD for The God Who Wasn't There, or to withhold negative statements, and I have not posted a review myself. Street Team members are given a free digital copy of the soundtrack and encouraged to go to Amazon and post a review of the music. That's it. About 5% of them do. There's no incentive to make the review positive or negative. However, while I think the Street Team members' reviews of the soundtrack CD on Amazon are sincere, and no harm has been done, this particular sample does naturally skew positive. If you're on the Street Team, you probably like the film soundtrack you've decided to back with your time. But then again, reviews are inherently biased, and fans tend to be more motivated than others in posting. Most reviews on Amazon Foremost Media products are positive for that reason. I'll freely admit to sending people to Amazon, but my goal is battling obscurity, not battling negative opinion, and I certainly can't stop anyone from posting a negative review. The Street Team itself. A Street Team is a group of volunteer supporters who distribute flyers and stickers and otherwise spread the word about a band or film online and offline. You say, it's sad when big corporations do this, but when independent political folks like Fleming do it, it becomes a little creepy. Here's where I think your aim is considerably off the mark. To be opposed to a Street Team is nearly tantamount to being opposed to the very idea of promoting indie artists. I believe promotion should be honest and ethical, but promotion itself is not an evil. And organizing promotion is not an evil. To eliminate Street Teams would be largely to give up and turn over the marketplace to those who have the money to promote via advertising and other expensive means. It would strengthen messages backed by money and weaken messages backed by passion. I think the Street Team for The God Who Wasn't There is a great example of passion being organized into action, and I'm proud of it. I give theatrical rights away for free, and then a group like SF Atheists holds a screening and earns upwards of $1,000 to help their extremely important efforts. Volunteers go to a website where grassroots action is made easier and conversations all over the web get started over whether Jesus really did exist. A very legitimate question that is nonetheless the third rail of mainstream media conversations about Christianity. Street Teams aren't creepy, and this one in particular is doing some very real, verifiable good. Money. You write that when I attacked Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bill O'Reilly via Fair Use Press, I insisted the works were a form of political protest, but Fleming still charged money for the products. He did the same when he released portions of Nothing So Strange under a Creative Commons license. It's one thing to support free speech. It's another to try to make money off of other people's support for it. Really, I'm just shaking my head in wonder at this accusation. I have never made any profit whatsoever from any of my fair use press ebooks. The Schwarzenegger Attack was given away, with a high-res premium edition sold at first for $1. Both editions are free now and have been for about a year. I added a $1 price to that specifically to demonstrate fair use, that I wasn't taking a non-commercial cop-out, so Schwarzenegger and his attorney couldn't claim that's why they didn't sue. That's what my activism through Fair Use Press is about, demonstrating the limits of fair use. I want people to look at what I do, see that I got away with it, and then do more of the same. The commercial marketplace, where messages like Bill O'Reilly's already live, is an important battlefield in this fight. Just because I fight in that space doesn't mean I'm making a profit from Fair Use Press. I don't, and it certainly isn't part of the plan. I spend far more on promotion and advertising than I take in, and my best case scenario for the God who wasn't there is to break even on marketing expenses. Production costs are already written off, gladly, as a loss. All of my indie film work and free culture activism operates in the red, subsidized by the Hollywood work for hire assignments. I take that also pay my rent. I'm not, as you say, using well-meaning people to make money. I'm putting in my own money and time to the same purpose as the people I'm working side by side with. The fact that we earn revenue to try to keep the project somewhat self-sustaining cannot reasonably be termed exploitation. Criticism is a good thing, Aaron, and we free culture activists, of course, do need to criticize each other where criticism is justified, and I certainly should be held publicly accountable for anything I publicly do. But in this case, I really think you've gone overboard and made accusations that have little merit. Aaron replies, "Thanks for responding. I can't say I'm glad to hear you don't expect to turn a profit on any of this, but it certainly allays any fears of exploitation. But I feel like you missed my main point about the street team, the one I ended the article with. I just wish it felt a little more like a cooperative community with the aim of spreading the real news. There's nothing wrong with telling people about music or movies you like, or even putting up posters to promote them. Where it gets creepy is when this natural enthusiasm is co-opted and channeled into a structured, top-down sort of system. Now, I'm not just expressing my opinions, I'm following orders so I can get goodies. That fundamentally changes things. Maybe an analogy will help. My mom likes telling people about interesting things I've done. There's nothing wrong with this. The people she talks to like knowing this stuff. But you have to admit it would be creepy if I started providing my mom with a list of my achievements and awarding her points every time she found a way to mention them. Mom begins to feel used, her friends begin to feel duped, and I look like a narcissist. There's no need to get rid of the promotion system, just scale it back a little. Provide a list of suggested actions, a forum where people can talk about what they're doing, and then offer to mail a t-shirt or something to people who work hard. You see, contrary to popular opinion, even in the free culture community, oddly enough, rewards are incredibly destructive. Study after study shows they actually demotivate people, encourage people to cheat and lie, and cause them to make stupid decisions about trade-offs. For an excellent book on the subject, see Alfie Kohn's Punished by Rewards. Official site. Fleming's post on independent distribution. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 1, 2005. Powered by Thankful.org. Raw Thought. By Aaron Swartz. Stanford, season finale. June 3. Nobody likes being called to the principal's office. Even in high school, when the principal was cool, I'd tell him school was harmful and should be abolished. He'd agree, and we'd talk about it. It still felt wrong. And it always felt worse when, as surprisingly often was the case, the powerful man in the big chair talked about how powerful you, the puny little pushed-around student, were. I remember the time in 7th grade that the teacher told me to leave the room and fill out one of his dispute resolution forms, his method of classroom discipline. I resisted by filling out the form in an absurd manner, because the whole thing was just so degrading. Then the teacher complained that I was being condescending. A few years later, after the 7th grade teacher had moved out to a cabin in the Pacific Northwest with my 6th grade teacher, he came back to school and seemed much cooler, so I don't think it was really his fault. You sure weren't rich, didn't live in the city, didn't whisper sweet nothings, never told me I'm pretty. All this by way of saying I received a rather discomforting feeling when unnamed authority figure sent me a cryptic note saying she wanted me to come see her. I asked her about what, but she never replied. She later explained that she meant to, but it just got behind. Worried, I asked a few people about what unnamed authority figure did. Have you committed any crimes recently? Asked one. Not that I know of, I said. Maybe I kill people in my sleep. But how do I dispose of the bodies? The lake's already run dry. Another, always optimistic, insisted it must be a good thing. They wouldn't have her deliver bad news. It can only be good. I wasn't buying it. As I walked to the meeting, there was a different disposition. I heard a girl screaming her lungs out and then slapping her boyfriend, who had apparently cheated on her. The boyfriend was desperately penitent, insisting it was just an accident, not a pattern, and that he loved her. You cheated at cards and lied when you hung out. In bars making time with those girls you called old pals. None of this eased my discomfort, nor did the fact that I had a major assignment due in a couple hours. 90% of my grade in one class depended on what work I turned in today by 5 p.m., and I hadn't really started on it. I tried to do it last night, but I couldn't bring myself to do it until I was too tired to make any progress. I wasn't sure I'd have any better luck this morning. When I finally saw unnamed authority figure, she was so happy that I couldn't stop myself from smiling. Maybe she was right, maybe it was good news. Then we sat down. I wanted to talk to you about some of your behavior, she began. Oh, this wasn't going to be good. I cried when you left me. Now I'm wondering when you'll make it all up to me. She said she'd been tipped off by my IHUM TF, which was odd, since we'd just had a long talk a week ago or so, and I thought we'd worked everything out. Not that there really was a whole lot to work out. Actually, that talk probably just made it worse. But then she'd done her own research and begun telling me what she'd uncovered. She'd pulled my admissions applications and saw that I was really self-schooled, meaning I was probably a bit more isolated or sheltered from your peers than might be typical. She checked with the residence dean at my dorm and found I was too shy to ask someone for help moving a filing cabinet. She also heard amazingly that I'd written some hurtful things about a young woman I was dating. The TF had said that I once blurted something out in class, which I don't really remember specifically but certainly seems plausible. The TF also claimed that once I had jumped out at her and said boo. The TF also said that I'd once said she went to a lower class school and suggested I was trying to call her authority into question. It paints an interesting picture for me, she said. I laughed to myself. It's just like one of those television season finales, where the main characters get called before an authority figure who then proceeds to list everything they've done over the season, only it's all a little off and a little out of context. Like that Seinfeld finale, where everyone they'd ever met started to testify against them. See how I self-consciously point out the cliches I'm in. Let it never be said that this blog is not postmodern. It certainly was an interesting picture. I was beginning to sound sort of autistic or something. I feel like I've made a couple mistakes, I said. But doesn't everyone? The difference is that mine are just a little more public and mine are the ones being scrutinized. If reality TV has taught us anything, it's that you can find something in anything if you look hard enough. Don't I have the right to be over you yet? I've tried pretending. I tried to forget. We kept talking for a half hour altogether, but every time I tried to tell her about myself, it just kept sounding worse. The facts were all able to fit the frame. Well, what suggestions do you have? I finally asked. One strange thing about me is that I love hearing negative things about myself. You do? She replied. Yeah, I guess most people, when they receive nasty letters, they feel bad or something. But I love them the nastier the better. The ones that are all obscenities just make my day. Why? She asked. I don't know, I said, and thought about it. There's this theory, I said, that's very popular in our society that people have certain specific attributes, like personality traits. So some people are smart and other people are funny, and that's just how it is. I don't believe that. I think people are malleable. I think I'm malleable. So I hear something negative. I don't think, oh no, I'm a bad person. I think, well, that's something I can work on. She didn't seem convinced. Well, she didn't want to punish me or anything, she said, and she didn't know me well enough to give any specific advice. But she suggested I talk to my friends. I tried to persuade her that I had some and asked them about my outbursts and empathy. Though it's past 3 a.m., I would still let you in. 'Cause I can't go on dreaming alone. I couldn't find anything to take to lunch to read, which is generally a sign I'll find someone to talk to. And sure enough, I found one of those friends and sat down. Do you think I have problems with empathy? I asked him. Ooh, I don't know, he said. Why, I told him the story. Ha, that's pretty funny, he said. You got called to the principal's office for hurting someone's feelings. Afterwards, when my friend has left and I'm all alone, a hand grabs my shoulder. I spin around, but I don't recognize its owner. Hey, Swartz, I'm really sorry you didn't win Evil Dictator last night, he says. Uh-huh, I mumble. I voted for you, he says. Oh, thank you, I say and walk away. After a few seconds, I realize what he's referring to. The dorm passed out surveys for things like funniest guy, and so on, and announced the results in a Family Feud-style game show last night. Maybe I have more friends than I think. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 4, 2005. Powered by Thankful Orc. Raw Thought. By Aaron Swartz. Sneak peek. Voiceover. Aaron Swartz. The Stanford Diaries will return in September. Here's a sneak preview of what to expect next season. Kiefer Sutherland appears in a completely black room. Kiefer. Hi, I'm Kiefer Sutherland. You might know me better as Aaron Swartz and Aaron Swartz, The Stanford Diaries. B. It's been an exciting year, culminating in a jam-packed season finale. But that's not all there is to the story. Next year, I again play Aaron Swartz and Aaron Swartz, The Stanford Diaries, but this time there's a whole lot more to the story. Aaron Swartz and unseen teacher meet in a parking garage. Teacher stays in the shadows, face never revealed, although he or she is clearly wearing a trench coat. Aaron. Oh, hey, I just wanted to tell you I read that book you recommended. Teacher. Oh, good. Aaron. Well, I guess I'll see you next year. As Aaron turns to head away, the teacher grabs him by the arm. Teacher. Wait, there's something I need to tell you. Aaron. Oh. Teacher. I read your last paper. Aaron. That wasn't appropriate. Aaron. What do you mean? Teacher. I think you know what I mean. Aaron. The assignment was to write about sex, the body, or reproduction. I wrote about sex. Teacher. Well, in the context of what you said to me, I had to take it to the Sexual Harassment Center. We just had a consult about it, and it's going in your file, but they're not opening an investigation on you or anything. I'm sure you didn't mean it as harassment, but I had to take it to them just to be safe. Aaron. Oh, okay. Teacher. I didn't really have a choice, Aaron, given what you said. Don't worry, you're not in trouble or anything. Aaron. I said okay. Is there anything more you can tell me? Teacher. Well, it's confidential. Aaron. But it's about me. I waive my confidentiality rights. Kiefer. Was the sexual harassment claim responsible for the meeting with unnamed authority figure? Will this file open on Aaron cause later misunderstandings to be seen in a negative light, causing Aaron to be suspended or even expelled for the things he said, forcing him to turn around and hire the right-wing Foundation for Individual Rights in Education to sue Stanford University under California's Leonard Law, which extends First Amendment protection to private universities? Who knows? I just read the scripts they give me. The actual Aaron Swartz marches out in front of Kiefer. Aaron. Okay, that's enough. Hi, I'm Aaron Swartz, author of Aaron Swartz, The Stanford Diaries. Despite the 24-season finale and deep throat references I've chosen to use in this post, I'd just like to let folks out there know that this meeting actually did happen, although not in a parking garage. Kiefer, are we done here? Because, I've got some people in my trunk I need to take care of. Aaron, yeah, let me give you a hand with that. Kiefer and Aaron walk off into the sunset that has just appeared in their solid black room. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 6, 2005. Powered by Thankful Orc. Raw Thought. By Aaron Swartz. SFP. Home. Sweet Home. I started looking for an apartment as soon as we headed out to Cambridge for an interview, but few things had been made available yet. Then the server died and I was distraught for a while. By the time I started looking again, few things were available, and in the past few weeks things have gotten increasingly desperate. We went through Craigslist and made up a list of options, but each one seemed to fall apart upon investigation. Occasionally, especially as deadlines moved closer, I would stumble across an amazing deal and throw all of my hope into it, convincing myself that we'd get it and all would work out fine. These deals repeatedly collapsed, eventually leaving me where I was this morning, at Stanford, without an apartment or a plane ticket, and getting kicked out the next morning. My dad, thankfully, was at MIT this week, and he took some time to go down to the housing office and investigate their options. He discovered that it was possible to get an MIT dorm room and pay by the night and suggested I stay there while I figured out a more long-term place to stay. I was not looking forward to move out of one dorm room just to move into another, but then he found that MIT's beautiful Simmons Hall, aka the bubble wrap building, Sean insists it looks like a Tetris reject, was available to stay in. I'd always admired photos of Simmons Hall, thought of trying to find an excuse to visit, even considered going to MIT because of it until I realized that there was little chance I'd get to stay there. And now I was getting to stay there. Apparently, we might even be able to stay there for the whole summer. So I signed up for a few nights, got an amazingly low room rate, and bought a plane ticket for tomorrow morning, also surprisingly cheap and perfect. I thought I'd have to leave out of some obscure airport and stop in some obscure hub, but it's direct from SF. Procrastination really worked out this time, it seems. Too bad I didn't get this kind of peace of mind earlier. Then I could have spent the week on the town, although I did have some fun segueing with Seth and going to dinner with some of Apple's Safari team. Now I just need to finish packing. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 9, 2005. Powered by Thankful.org. Raw Thought. By Aaron Swartz. Stanford SFP. Leaving on a jet plane. It's always odd how extraordinary things are just like their ordinary counterparts. Stanford is just like a school, only wealthier. Leaving home is just like going on vacation, only longer. And packing your dorm is just like packing up your hotel room, only bigger. Tonight the campus is so desolate. People missing, cars missing. Even the room is beginning to seem empty, although the hallways are filled with crud. I'm the last one left in our room of 4 people. With all my schoolwork done, it's surprisingly lonely. I wander down to talk to other people packing. Goodbye, Caroline, set of 3. Photo 1. Photo 2. Photo 3. As I wait outside with my bags the next morning, kids slowly file out and sit on the top of the picnic table, just like the cool kids do in television shows to indicate coolness. I sit away in the shade on the chair. Eventually my ride shows up and the group of kids waves goodbye. I wonder how many of them I'll see again. Bags are heavy. It's a good thing I didn't take public transportation. There's no way I would have made it. Not to mention the fact that when I hear a voice over the speaker says that public transportation is currently out. I wait in line for a long time at the curb until I get to the front, and they tell me they can't check my bags anymore. Then I spend a while running around looking for a cart machine that will take my money. Then I take the cart over to another long line and pay a lot of money to take my bags on the plane. Good thing I'm early. I still have 2 heavy bags to carry all the way to the terminal, unfortunately. Somehow I survive without any major damage. On the plane I read a long book which inspires me to write a long memoir. I then carry the heavy bags down to the baggage claim, buy another cart, grab the bags of the conveyor belt, take them to the cab stand and ask the cab driver to go to MIT. He doesn't know where Simmons Hall is, so he tells me to stop him when we get close. I scan the windows, seeing nothing but empty fields and abandoned warehouses when boom. This huge building pops up, much larger than it seems in pictures. That's it, I say, and the cab driver backs up. He places my stuff on the curb as I pay him and speeds off. Inside, an alienated student mans the desk, her lowered eyes not so subtly implying that she really doesn't want to talk to me. I tell her I'm checking in. Oh, she says in a dry monotone, you're that guy. I thought you'd be older. She gives me a key and asks me to fill out a confusing form, continually finding spots I haven't filled out. No, fill out everything. You left the box that says hash of children blank. While I'm doing this, some police come in and ask how to get to Tower B. She points them to the elevator at the end of the hall. Finally, I finish filling out the form and ask her how to get to my room. She looks it up and concludes it's in Tower B. Take the elevator at the end of the hall. I decide to go on an exploratory mission with just 1 bag to find my room before carrying everything down. It's a good thing I did since the elevator is surrounded by 3 cops. In front of them, the elevator door is open, revealing a whole group of kids in an elevator stuck halfway between floors. The kids seem resigned to their situation and are now sitting on the floor playing games. I don't trust these fucking elevators, says one cop. No way, me neither, answers another. I decide to back away to give them some space. After a short rest, I decide to try the other elevator, and it turns out it's much closer, so I laboriously drag my bags up and through using it. On the way to my room, there is a picture window onto a deck with some sort of yin-yang sculpture. The kids have filled it up with water and placed rubber duckies into it. Unfortunately, getting onto the deck requires a keycard, which I don't have. Simmons Hall is indeed pretty, if a little warm. Apparently, the computer lab is the only air-conditioned room. Meeting rooms of various sorts are scattered throughout the place, each fitted with a whiteboard and prints from Joseph Albers's Interaction of Color. Oddly, each print is also accompanied by a note with a number to call with questions and concerns about the artwork. I imagine the MIT student who calls and says, "I have a concern about print #49. Albers clearly intended to use a 345 sequence, but on the last square here it's printed as 346. Do you think you could send someone to take care of this?" There are also a series of kitchens and TV rooms, each differently shaped and furnished. Each TV room has a DVD player, VCR, and stairs up to the next floor where, in a different location, there is another room with a different shape and furnishings. The floor plans of the building are printed by the elevator for use in case of fire, I guess, and they're rather entertaining. They look just like normal floor plan squares and boxes with symbolic codes, except it's apparently been hit by a meteor, since there's a big squiggly-shaped hole right in the middle where the TV room is. In one of the meeting rooms, I found a large box someone had built out of wood, the inside covered in foam padding. Inside was a strange-looking device, a switch, and a bunch of wires. Outside was a light currently off that said, "Direct from the future." I tried figuring out what the box was, with little success. The whole thing felt like a puzzle out of Myst or something. The one thing I couldn't find, however, was a bathroom on my floor. I found a whole series of locked rooms with interesting labels: counseling, student government, mail, music, and my personal favorite, if only because it was the one with no locked meditation, but no bathroom. Finally, I tried to open the unmarked door next to my room and aha, a bathroom. Nice location, too. The only problem is it doesn't have lock. The next day as I walk outside, I'm hit in the face by Cambridge's dreadful weather. Unbearably snowy in the winter, it's unbearably hot and muggy in the summer. I guess it wasn't just because I was carrying bags yesterday that I was sweating. I walked the superblock to the student center where I get some food and buy a fan for my room. It makes things a little better, but it's still pretty terrible. Anyone in Cambridge got an air conditioner I could borrow? Maybe I should find some place to buy one. Update: the good folks at Y Combinator brought me over an air conditioner, which we jammed into one of the windows, and now it's awesome. Thanks. Finally, if anyone nearby wants to visit, just drop me an email. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 11, 2005. Powered by Painful Art. Raw Thought. By Aaron Swartz. SFP First Contact. Most of what a startup, or at least this startup, is about is solving various technical problems, fixing bugs, getting stuff done. At its worst, this stuff is boring to do. And even at its best, it's hard to describe and not much fun to hear. On the plane here, I wrote a memoir about my time with the W3C, and what was striking was not just that I omitted all the technical stuff from the story, but that I don't even remember the technical stuff. People stuff, on the other hand. So I've been holed up by myself in this elegant mid-dorm room. More photos: my favorite Jessica, formerly 404 from Y Combinator. The group that's funding the startup I'm working on stopped by to drop off a life-saving air conditioner, and we chatted for a bit. I get out once or twice a day to go get food at some place nearby, and at nights I sleep, but most of the time I just work. Y Combinator has weekly meetings where all the startups go over to their offices for dinner. I missed last week's because I didn't have a dorm, and so when I get there, I don't recognize anyone. I sort of wander around alone, trying not to look too stupid, which is what I normally do at parties anyway. At some point, we sit down at a long table with benches that they've placed in the room, which looks even nicer than before, with elegantly placed lights and abstract art on the walls. During some pre-dinner conversation, someone makes a pun. "You know, I read somewhere that bad puns are highly correlated with ick," Paul says. "I find that hard to believe," responds a founder. "I know some people who make lots of puns." "Well, correlations aren't perfect," responds another. "And ick isn't necessarily correlated with intelligence," comments Paul. I was really glad to see he backed off this claim. I was thinking about chiming in, but I was at the very edge of the table and planning to save my disagreements until after the money is in the bank. They planned to get a guest speaker each dinner. This week it was a patent attorney who admitted that patents were expensive and not very useful to a startup, he suggested, and cited a study that argued they would be useful later on. He gave us all packets and branded cell phone holders, but I forgot to take mine home. Afterwards, there was more talking. One group of founders described their history. "Well, we haven't really done any legitimate businesses before," they said. "What illegitimate businesses have you done?" I asked. "Oh, adult entertainment, student term papers, nothing illegal, but not the sort of things you want to show to VCs." I got to talk to RTM, which was really wonderful, and at some point I found myself in a conversation with Paul and a couple other people. Paul asked me if I could send him a copy of the infamous paper, and another person chimed in, "Oh, you're definitely sending me a copy." "Wait, you know about this?" asked Paul. "You don't?" replied the third person. It turned out everyone there had read my blog. "Oh," said Paul, "I only started reading it when it started mentioning me." Not long afterward, a group of people behind me pulled me away and introduced themselves. "And who are you?" they asked. Paul, from behind me, said, "This is Aaron Swartz. You don't know who Aaron Swartz is. He co-authored RSS." "Oh," said the kid, "well, then you made me quite a bit of money." At some point, Jessica pulled me aside to go over the legal paperwork, of which there is quite a bit. A group of Russian kids offered to drive me home in their van. "We're actually agents from the KGB, they explained, laughing, in their thick Russian accents. "We were sent here to spy on you. We bought a van because we were told all Americans drive vans. We try to blend in." They certainly made the most of it, swerving back and forth across the street and making crazy turns. Amazingly, though, we managed to find my place and they dropped me off. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 15, 2005. Powered by Time for Work. Raw Thought. By Aaron Swartz. SFP Dinner with Dan. One of the many nice things about living at MIT is that stuff happens here. Just down the street, for example, is the Frank Gehry designed Status Center Photos my favorite, which hosts, among many other things, the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory LCS plus AI Lab equals CSAIL, the World Wide Web Consortium W3C, Noam Chomsky, and so on. The W3C happens to be hosting their Technical Architecture Group meeting, where the web's biggest minds come together to argue about such pressing issues as whether a URL can be said to refer to a physical object, like a truck. Dan Connolly, who might be considered the #2 guy at the W3C after Tim Berners-Lee, the web's inventor, of course, saw that I was in Cambridge and invited me to come over this evening. When I got there, he introduced me to fellow TAG members Norm Walsh, who some readers may know as the DocBook guy and Henry Thompson, author of XSV, and we all headed to a pool hall. Tired from a long day arguing about such weighty subjects, they tried to avoid talking about them, which ended up meaning that they mostly talked about pool. I'd never played pool before, but in 2 games I was able to make 1 or 2 halfway decent shots. I need to work on doing all the various things at once. Dan Connolly is very dismissive of my swearing off of competitive games. "Oh, pool isn't pool a competitive game," he sneered to me in email. To be honest, playing was sort of a breach, and when I described the application process, he grumbled about it sounding competitive. It wasn't a game, though. I assume it's because Dan's a social conservative. While we were walking there, someone suggested a union picket line might just be an attempt to extort money, and on the way back, there were grumbles about people who didn't know well enough to pay off credit card debts. Why isn't this taught in school? They wondered. After pool, we headed over to a restaurant just next door and ordered food. Sitting in the little booth, as we talked about friends and food, I realized how absurdly detailed tag problems really are. Did Ma Bell have a department that sat and thought about the meaning of a phone number? A team to come up with recommendations about the uses of a phone? Surely this is the only technology in history to have such philosophical problems. As we walked into town, Dan told us excitedly about the weekly CSAIL hockey game, which I'd never heard of before. Then we parted ways and I headed home and called my mom. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 16, 2005. Powered by Thankful Work. Raw Talk. By Aaron Swartz. SFP, fire alarm. One of the hazards of dorm life is that fire alarms are always going off. At Stanford, here's how it went the 3 or 4 times it happened last year. An alarm would go off. I wouldn't hear it because I was in my room with my headphones on or asleep. Eventually, I'd notice or get woken up. I'd throw on my pants and walk downstairs and outside, where a group of kids would accumulate. After what seemed like an interminable wait in the shivering cold, a fire truck would show up. The fireman would walk inside and, after a couple minutes, walk out again. Then everybody would go back into the building, even though nothing was actually explained. As it turns out, it worked much the same way here at MIT. except they have a new high-tech talking fire alarm in every room to recite a paragraph of instructions twice before telling you to leave the building. When I got outside, there were much fewer people. It is summer after all, and the fire trucks showed up much more quickly. And there were 2 of them, and after that, some policemen in their blue uniforms. And then, inexplicably, a gray MIT logo van pulled up and a bunch of fat guys in suspenders, but no uniform got out and went inside. But still, no explanation. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 16, 2005. Powered by Thankful.org. Raw Thought by Aaron Swartz. The Immorality of Freakonomics. As the hype around the book Freakonomics reaches absurd proportions, now an international bestseller, the authors have been signed for a monthly column in the New York Times Magazine. I think it's time to discuss some of the downsides that I mostly left out of my main review. The most important of which is that economist Stephen Levitt simply does not appear to care, or even notice, if his work involves doing evil things. The 1960s, as is well known, had a major civilizing effect on all areas of American life. Less well known, however, was the immediate pushback from the powerful centers of society. The process involved a great number of things, notably the network of right-wing think tanks I've written about elsewhere. But in the field of education, it led to a crackdown on those institutions which have played the major role in the indoctrination of the young, as a contemporary report, The Crisis of Democracy, put it. The indoctrination centers, notably schools, weren't doing their job properly, and so a back-to-basics approach with more rote memorization of meaningless facts and less critical thinking and intellectual development was needed. This was mainly done under the guise of accountability for both students and teachers. Standardized tests, you see, would see how well students had memorized certain pointless facts, and students would not be allowed to deviate from their assigned numbers. Teachers, too, would have their jobs depend on the test scores their students got. Teachers who decided to buck the system and actually have their students learn something worthwhile would get demoted or even fired. Not surprisingly, as always happens when you make people's lives depend on an artificial test, teachers begun cheating, and it is here that Professor Levitt enters the story. He excitedly signed up with the Chicago public school system to try to build a system that would catch cheating teachers. Levitt and his co-author write excitedly about this system and the clever patterns it discovers in the data, but mostly ignore the question of whether helping to get these teachers fired is a good idea. Apparently, even rogue economists jump when the government asks them to. Levitt has a few arguments. Teachers were setting students up to fail in the higher grade they would be advanced to, but these are tacked on as afterthoughts. Levitt never stops to ask whether contributing to the indoctrination of the young or getting teachers fired might not be an acceptable area of work. Despite being an economist, he never weighs any benefits or even considers the costs. Levitt, by all appearances, was not, like some of his colleagues, a self-conscious participant in this regressive game. He was just a rube who got taken in. But surely preventing others from the same fate would be a more valuable contribution. You should follow me on Twitter here. June 17, 2005. Powered by Thankful.org. Raw Thought by Aaron Swartz. The Intentionality of Evil. English Deutsch. As children were fed a steady diet of comic books, and now movies based off of them in which brave heroes save the planet from evil people. It's become practically conventional wisdom that such stories wrongly make the line between good and evil too clear. The world is more nuanced than that, we're told. But this isn't actually the problem with these stories. The problem is that the villains know they're evil. And people really grow up thinking things work this way. Evil people intentionally do evil things. But this just doesn't happen. Nobody thinks they're doing evil, maybe because it's just impossible to be intentionally evil. Maybe because it's easier and more effective to convince yourself you're good. But every major villain had some justification to explain why what they were doing was good. Everybody thinks they're good. And if that's the case, then intentionality doesn't really matter. It's no defense to say, to take a recently famous example, that New York bankers were just doing their jobs, convinced that they were helping the poor or something, because everybody thinks they're just doing their jobs. Eichmann thought he was just doing his job. Eichmann, of course, is the right example because it was Hannah Arendt's book Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil that is famously cited for this thesis. Eichmann, like almost all terrorists and killers, was by our standards a perfectly normal and healthy guy doing what he thought were perfectly reasonable things. And if that normal guy could do it, so could we. And while we could argue who's worse, them or us, it's a pointless game since it's our actions that we're responsible for. And looking around, there's no shortage of monstrous crimes that we've committed. So the next time you mention one to someone and they reply, yes, but we did with a good intent, explain to them that's no defense. The only people who don't are characters in comic books. You should follow me on Twitter here, June 23, 2005, powered by Thankful World.